Hello, today I will be explaining my first grade art lesson. The students will be learning about different lines, shapes, colors, textures, and forms. For the engagement of the lesson, I would display an image. It could be any image on the board, and I decided with Vincent van Gogh, Starry Night in Rome. I would first ask my students to just analyze the piece for a couple minutes before I start asking them questions. So, a couple questions I would ask my students: what kind of colors do you see? Are there any texture within the piece? Any forms, recognizable shapes, and any lines? Afterwards, I would go ahead and allow my students to explore art using markers, colored pencils, paints. I will also be providing different colored paper as well. Scissors would also be provided for them to use. Uh, I would also bring in some outside elements like leaves, uh, a part of a tree bark, flowers. Of course, making sure none of my students have any allergic reactions to any of those. And then they can take their paper, and with colored pencil it would work best, and it can transfer the texture to the paper and they can incorporate that as well. So once students have been exploring with art, the different shapes they incorporated, color, lines, the teacher would go ahead and expand within the lesson and go in depth more with the different lines, shapes, forms, and textures that can be used within an art piece. So the teacher would go and provide some examples here over the different lines: horizontal, vertical, some diagonal, zigzag, swirls, curve, and going over some shapes, a great way to introduce shapes within the first grade as well. Going over textures and forms. Now, textures and forms may be a little challenging for some students because, again, this is a first grade lesson, but it allows them to go ahead and explore within textures and forms, and then later on building upon what they previously learned back in the first grade. So they've had some exposure already to it. And then the teacher would just explain with textures how to create little simple ones here. I provided like cobblestone, some hatching, some stipples, some kind of like scales on a fish, and then building upon shapes and to create 3D forms here. So of course your rectangle, square, cylinder, triangular, pyramid here. So after this expansion, the students will go ahead and expand upon what they just learned about different lines, textures, forms, and shapes. And they're going to go ahead and implement that within another art piece. The students are expected to create a town. It's however they want to draw their town, or it's not even a town. Maybe it's just a little backdrop of a little house with roads running through it, maybe some stop signs, but they're required to incorporate lines, color, shape, texture, and form within their piece based off what they've learned in the expand part. And the teacher will be walking around asking some informal questions such as, what colors are you using? What type of buildings are you going to be implementing within your piece? What kind of texture is going to be within your buildings? Just little questions like that. And a little bit to further their knowledge. Oh, what do we see within cities? What colors? Do we see any textures, lines, things like that, to have them thinking about their previous experience they see. Maybe they don't get to go into town. Okay, what do you see on the way to school? What do you see here in the classroom or when you come into school? What do you witness? What do you experience? Little questions like that throughout the expansion part. For the evaluation stage, the students are going to be required to incorporate these as well. The student will be given a rubric to follow just to see if they can incorporate what they've learned within the lesson. And then afterwards, the teacher will display their pieces throughout the classroom, maybe outside the classroom, and then afterwards, the students are going to be welcome to take them home after they've been displayed for a little while. For the closure, the teacher would ask the students, okay, what have y'all learned? Tell me, explain to me what you've learned within this lesson. And the students will go ahead and say, oh, I learned how to make forms, or oh, I knew how to draw a new line, or I learned this new shape today, or if I mix red and yellow, it would create an orange color. Things like that to see that they've learned something and they took some meaning behind this lesson away. So again, this was my first grade art lesson, incorporating lines, textures, shapes, colors, and forms. Thanks.